So welcome back to Most Powerful Women, Anne. This is your first time at MPW London, isn't it?
That's right. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. Well, it's all the more appropriate that Anne Finucane, who has long been a vice chairman at B of A, and as Claire said, is on the Fortune Most Powerful Women list for the United States, and has been a long-time member of this community, it's all the more appropriate that she's here because she is pending regulatory approval, the new chairman of B of A, EMEA.
Right.
So what does that involve right now amidst this preparing for Brexit environment?
Well, in the world of financial services, as in many other industries, but in ours particularly, we have to stand up a European bank and be prepared to do that business day one, which would be March of 2019. We have to assume a hard Brexit. Therefore, we have to have the capacity to handle all the banking business that would be Europe-based, currently done in the UK, which will now have to be done in Europe. So London will remain in place, but we also need to stand up sort of a mirror image in Europe.
And you've chosen Dublin as your new EU hub, and
right.
How did that, was that an easy decision or was that a complicated decision?
Well, probably both, but one of the things is we were in Dublin, this will be our 50th year in Dublin. Obviously the language is easier, ready workforce. We already had about 700 people there in tech and ops, so it's got a very good, not only good community for technology and operations, but a community beyond banking and financial services. So it's a ready-made workforce. And we had strong banking relationships in the past in Ireland. But we do have branches, banking hubs in Paris, Frankfurt, I mean, where you would expect us to, Milan, in Madrid, etc.
So will those, you will be building up Dublin. Are there any details that you can give us in terms of how much you'll be building up Dublin and what we might see in those other cities like Paris, Frankfurt, Milan, Madrid?
Right. So I'd say the focus will be first on Dublin and second on Paris. We're taking on new space in Paris. We're building out the space we have in Dublin. And you'll see more in the way of trading in Paris and more in the way of true banking in Dublin. So that will be kind of the difference. And we'll be hiring people, but they'll be in the hundreds at first and maybe ultimately in the thousands, but in the beginning. In
both cities?
Yes.
In Dublin and Paris?
Yes.
And what is this move, what are these moves going to mean for the employee population of B of A in the UK?
Well, some of them will be moving, and that's disruptive. Many will come from, will be new employees or may come from the States. But we've had at least the past year or so to be playing this out, working it through, and now we've been able to establish who will move, who won't. It's certainly disruptive. I mean, it's disruptive for any of you that are in the financial services business to consider whether you have to make a move or not. I think that there'll still be a fair amount of business out of London. I mean, UK, New York, London, and to a lesser degree, Hong Kong are really the hubs of financial activity in the world. So I think that we'll see certainly a lot of movement toward Europe, but there's great expertise in London still.
So this is disruptive for B of A, this is disruptive for B of A's clients. Is there any way, Anne, how you can explain how to make this whole process a little more sort of comforting and less disruptive to your clients?
More humane? Well, the first thing is the clients know about this. This isn't specific to B of A, and it's not specific to any one bank. We're all doing it. Right. We have to do it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think that we have gone through a playbook with all of our clients of those things that have to move, when they have to move. Can we sunset one contract and begin another elsewhere? We need to do a warm handoff. We need the bankers to have a warm handoff. And we have rehearsed this with clients. Just the same as, frankly, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Barclays, and others have had to do. So all of us, I think the opportunity, if you will, is that in the last couple of years, the American banks have been able to get some real traction in Europe. We were able to capitalize ahead of the European banks, recapitalize our banks after the financial crisis. So we already had some momentum. We don't want to see that momentum in any way dissolve. So we're very focused on making this as easy as possible for our clients.
So Anne has been the, as Claire mentioned, the chair of B of A's ESG committee. And the real B of A's leader on everything involving social responsibility. Anne is also happens to be on the board of a company that is not that well known in Europe, but is America's 8th largest company, CVS, the drugstore chain, which made a radical decision a few years ago to give up $3 billion in revenue from tobacco to refashion itself as a healthcare company. So Anne, my question to you is, what is your best advice as other companies that are trying to become leaders in that space?
Well, in the case of CVS, they were rebranding themselves and re-engineering themselves to be a true health company. And I think the board correctly thought, along with Helena Folks, who you know, was since departed CVS, that in order to reposition itself as a health company, you really had to look at what were we selling. And to sell tobacco seems so discordant with being a health company. And you could say, well, then they shouldn't sell anything sweet, or, I mean, you can bring that to its logical conclusion, but I think we felt that there is no moderation in tobacco smoking that is, well, gee, that's not as bad if you just do a little bit of it, or you can work in a cigarette to a healthy lifestyle. You cannot. So, the idea was, if we were going to be a health company, we had to change what we were doing. And the hope and the plan was that we would make up those revenues in a number of ways. One, with healthier food. Two, and probably more importantly, by winning contracts on the business-to-business side. We do the pharmacy pieces of health insurance. You get health insurance, you have to go to the pharmacy, and there's a health benefit for pharmacy services. Could we convince those insurers and those providers and those companies that would sign up with us that we were a better company? And that is where we won. So we more than made up for the money, but not in the first year. By the second year, we were in good shape.
And that was anticipated as the board made that decision to approve that plan. Was it anticipated that that CVS would make up the loss in the way it did?
Yes. I think we thought that we might make it up on the retail side, which was less successful.
Oh, interesting.
But we certainly made it up on the business-to-business side very successfully. And now retail has come in on the back end. We did think we would make it up. We didn't think we would make it up in the first year. We were having a strong year anyway, so I do think that we had some tailwind to make this decision. But really, if you're going to be a healthcare company, how could you do something different than that? And that's also informed us at the bank. We have this ESG committee, and for those of you that have this sort of thing in your company, I really encourage you. What we've had is every line of business and every leader of staff areas together, and we make decisions together. So it's much easier to have, it's more difficult in the beginning, but easier in the end to have a discussion about products and services, agreements you're going to have, decisions you're making, whether you're going to stop a certain fee or you're going to include a certain service. If you can have that with the business line right up front, it's a better discussion. It's a more fulsome discussion, and you can make a decision and change the corporate culture much more quickly.
So when you say you're doing it together, are you talking about the structure of the committee? There are business unit heads and staff people on this committee so that the decisions are made together?
Yes, but we have the top of the house there.
Okay.
So you can really make, when you have a difficult decision, you've got the real decision makers of the company there, and you're proffering something, making your case so that it is, it's embraced by everyone, as opposed to some, you know, addendum over here that's bolted on later and nobody seems to know about it.
Right. Who has a question? None yet? Or okay. Wait for the mic here and please identify yourself. Thank you.
I'm Leticia Gonçalves. I'm the head of Monsanto Europe and Middle East. I'm intrigued by this last part of your conversation in terms of how you get the partnership on the sustainability efforts with the business. A lot of companies are embarking in sustainability effort, governance effort, but in many cases, it gets difficult to get the top management to really commit to that and then become a cultural change in the company. So do you have any tips on how you could be successful in that?
Well, the first thing is that we made a decision in the financial services world. Obviously, we went through a crisis, so you have to rethink your whole gestalt in the aftermath of that, and that's what we did. We wanted to, our corporate culture would be one of responsible growth, growing responsibly, thinking holistically, helping people with their financial lives through the power of every connection we would have with them. So how could we lay all of that out? So we looked at everything.
So you're talking about the crisis of 2008.
Right, which, you know, was prolonged.
Yes.
Unfortunately for many of us, those in the banking industry and those that were on the client side. So that gave us the opportunity to rethink it. But I'll just give you a specific example. On the environment, as you know, you can talk about philanthropy, or you're going to be carbon neutral as a company, and those are things you can do without the businesses. You can make that sort of decision corporately. But in our case, what we wanted to do was demonstrate the business of environmental business. So how could we get the businesses involved? And what became like pushing on a string in the early days has become a formidable business some years later, so that we are the leading underwriter of green bonds, a large issuer of green bonds. In the United States, we do the most in terms of tax equity, in terms of pulling deals together. So we make money at this, and it's actually a calling card in terms of energy efficiency or wind or solar power. We'd be a go-to bank. Well, that gets everyone's attention then. And if you can get a few early wins by working with a piece of business and showing that, others will come along. That's a very important element.
So B of A made headlines in April when it made the decision to stop doing business with companies that sell military-style guns for non-military purposes. And you went beyond what other banks decided to do in that space. How was that decision made, and what kind of, can you quantify how much in terms of potential business you are sacrificing for that purpose?
Yeah, well, this is a complicated situation in so much as to the European marketplace, it seems like there are all sorts of things about guns that seem unusual in America. But remember, we have a Second Amendment right that allows one to arm oneself and defend oneself, and it's held very seriously in the United States. And gun ownership is prolific in the US, and you have to understand that as a start. We made a decision that we would no longer lend or finance manufacturers of, as you say, military-style weaponry, like the semi-automatics or the automatic guns that are so often the weapon of choice in mass shootings in the United States, those that sold them to civilians. So there are lots of manufacturers of these kinds of guns to military or to law enforcement. That's not where we were looking. And it's also not solving the problem. The problem is one of mental health, and that needs to be addressed. And the other is probably about making sure one knows who has what gun. But those are public policy issues that we couldn't address. This we could address. We could cut off financing to those that sold to civilians, and it was finite. It's not a complete solution, but it's something we could do directly. We could do it fairly immediately. It would take a few months to get through some contracts we had. And the way the decision was made is we had a discussion in the ESG committee. We had a discussion at the board, but ultimately it was the CEO's decision that he had with me, and that we decided that we would go ahead, and we informed all the others. But you can't take that as a group discussion. If the CEO doesn't want to do it, it's not happening. And it's controversial. So yes, we lost that business. I think we lost some other business from those who feel that we were impinging on Second Amendment rights. I also believe we've probably won business. But the important thing is we did it because we felt that there was fear amongst our employees. We had 150 employees that in some way had been affected by the mass shootings. A relative had died or been affected. And we had thousands of customers who had been affected. We were a shelter-in-place banking center in Parkland. We were the backdrop in Dallas. We had employees involved in Orlando. So this was really about what could we do to lower the temperature of fear. They say that more than 70% of high school children believe that they could have such an incident happen in their school. It's unimaginable in the United States. So it was less political and really trying to speak to the culture of protecting our people.
Is this an issue at all outside the United States, or was this a decision that you just thought, we need to do this in the United States and it's not an international issue?
Well, it's not an international issue. There may be international manufacturers of semi-automatics who are selling them in the U.S. and they'd be under the same mandate. But yeah. It wouldn't be the same issue.
Any questions?
Yes, there's one back here.
Okay.
I'm Sophie Newton. I work at a company called Brain Labs. I have a rather cheeky question, if I may. We've done a lot of Brain Labs around gender-neutral language. I was wondering if you'd consider changing your title to vice chair, not vice chairman.
Sure.
Sure. Is that an executive decision?
Yeah, done.
Anne also oversees marketing for B of A, so, you know, smart person to ask for that. Yes, we have a question back there.
Oh, it's more of a comment, which is,
hold on, wait for the mic, and please identify yourself.
Hi, Gillian Wilmot. I'm chairman of Senate and UK Coaching and some other stuff. I'm one of a small number of women who prefers chairman because we view it as a gender-neutral word, and we're not great with the piece of furniture title. So we really want to be chairman, and that can be either gender.
Well, can you two discuss, and I'll just do whatever.
We'll give you some advice. Just saying, there's always an alternative perspective.
And we're really out of time, but I just want to ask you, what is the best advice that you pass on to young people about navigating a successful career?
Well, you and I have talked about this a little bit, which is also prepare for the bumps. So I think that we all intend to live long lives. We want long careers. The fact that you have a setback is in no way an indication that things can't go forward. But the setback is a setback. So I really do believe that we should be talking more about those moments that were more difficult, either because you have to roll back your career for personal reasons, family reasons, health reasons, or because you've had an incident in your career that was less than stellar and you need to sort of climb your way back up. These things happen. They happen to men, they happen to women, and they're going to happen in a long career, and they probably have as much to do with your success as any promotion you'll ever get.
Absolutely. The value of failure and the opportunity to use a crisis as a moment for positive change. Thanks for telling us about both, Anne.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.